fire protection in your Bermuda Triangle or whatever? I'm sorry, I can't remember what you called it. Forgotten Triangle. What do you mean you don't have fire protection?
No fire hydrant.
Oh, thank you. All right, okay.
I agree with that.
Thank you. The lady with the purple sweater? The lady with the purple sweater, would you like to ask your question? All right.
The question of the foothills hasn't come up this afternoon, and I would like to ask Jack and Joe, what is the current status? Is there an agreement with the foothills?
Is this for water, you mean?
How it relates to water?
Oh, for water, for the foothills.
So, the foothills is a very complicated story. As you well know, the original developer went bankrupt. Could not move forward with the OCP, the construction and the development, as it was defined within the OCP of Lantzville. It was then attempted to, the mortgage holder attempted to sell it off as two separate parcels. And one of the developers came back, I don't know if you were in council chamber, where he directed council to do this, do that. But anyways, after that little session, we never saw him again. It was then purchased as a single parcel. And they came back and asked us for continuing to work with us to proceed with that development. In this particular MOU I signed, because I thought we just had not demanded enough from the original developer. In this new MOU that I signed with this developer, and he still has to come back with his plan, so nothing is cast in concrete there. This plan gives us 900 acres of parkland, 200 acres free title. That wasn't in the original agreement. They've agreed to build us a water reservoir. That wasn't in the original agreement. And they're going to give us the $6 million, but phased. So we won't be getting it up front. But of course, the original developer went bankrupt, and that's the reason he could never come up with the $6 million anyways. So I'm particularly pleased that at least we have this particular developer under control, and I really look forward to see what he comes up with. But there's nothing firm other than we signed an MOU, and that is a requirement under the legislation. So we'll see what he brings up.
All right, any other questions?
Check. So that was directed at Joe.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Was that Joe? One moment, sorry. Sorry, Joe.
Is there any additional information you need on that? There's a few other.
How does it affect? You say that they would build a reservoir?
For all of
I want
us.
to know how all these houses that we're going to build in the foothills.
730.
Yes. Would that have an impact on this water agreement for Lantzville?
Who fills the reservoir?
The MOU I signed says at the bottom, unfetteredly, there is no commitment on this community to give them water. They said, it was sort of amusing, at our council chamber, the developer came in and he said, I have enough water for my development as well as Lantzville, which of course we didn't believe. But we have made no water commitment to them in any way.
First off, an MOU isn't required by legislation. What they're talking about is laying out a plan for a phased development agreement. When it comes to the standpoint of the foothills themselves, their original conditions when they were approved as part of the OCP back in 2005 was that they were required to find their own water, period. And without that, they wouldn't move forward. When it comes to the standpoint of the reason why that they were approved that way is because they wanted to, they signed off on it. They did it that way. The other concern was traffic. The other concern was with regards to the impact on the area of Winchelsea, Phillip Road, areas like that. One of the portions of the MOU is to move the development that was going to occur to the rear of the property that was going to access through Vipond towards the front of the property into the urban containment boundary, the developable area, which I believe will put a greater impact on the traffic in the Phillips Road area And further to that, it'll remove some conditions that gave council the ability to regulate that. Is one of the proposals on the part of council is to guarantee them their zoning for the next, I can't remember if it's 10 or 20 years, to remove the ability of the community to regulate them.
Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, my question is to, sorry, I'm Graham Savage, I'm a member of the Current Council.
No council members.
Message, you're ready. You're ready to ask.
We already asked the question. Sorry, you already asked the question, I think you.
We only get one?
Yeah, you only get one. But, hang on a second. I don't know if you find this a fun idea or not, but, no, just as far as amalgamation or separating, I mean, I think it's interesting. There seems to be a good cross-section of Lantzville here. There's Upper Lantzville, Lower Lantzville, long-term residents, more newer residents like myself. Just a show of hands out of curiosity, would everybody be comfortable with that, to see whether, just to see if anyone's interested in amalgamation with Nanaimo or not, just as like a yes/no kind of answer? With that, do you want to do that?
Yeah, just drop poll.
Yeah, just a hand, just to see where people sit. Like, is anybody in favor of amalgamating with Nanaimo? Anybody? Just a show of hands. No? No? And those that are not? Those that are not? There you go. Okay. That's good, valuable information for everybody. It's a good cross-section. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Undecided. Hang on, yeah. I just like to, I don't know, just hang on, Joe. I don't know if, I was going to say, I'm new to this, obviously, and I did look it up a little bit before I was asked to do this, and one of the main jobs I have is to make you guys look brilliant, and I think you've all served the community one way or another in a really good way. Not everybody gets everything and does everything, the way everybody wants it, but I think everybody's done something great. And also to serve the audience, that you get the answers to the questions that you came for, that you came here today for. And I don't know if that's happened. In general, do you feel that you have the answers to the questions that you came here for? Just one second. Do you want to put a show of hands up if you feel you got the answer to the question you came here for? If you don't feel like you got the answer, raise your hand. You don't feel like you got the answers, like the audience came looking for answers today. Do they in general feel that we've served them and that you've answered their questions? In general, do you feel like you have the answers to the questions that you came here to get answered today?
Rephrase that a little bit. Some people have more than one question.
Okay. Just in general, if you came with questions, did you get them answered, yes or no?
Not all.
Yeah, okay, not all of them, but in general, okay. That's what we're looking for, general questions.
Candidates.
Do you want to answer more questions? Do the candidates want to answer more questions?
Just, I want to caveat first, I am running for council, but the question is, it's completely apolitical, it's to do with the referendum question, and I think for everybody in here, you could hear from the people that are running for the mayor's chair as to what their thoughts are on the referendum question.
Well, we agreed that there wasn't going to be any council members kind of put forward anything, and I think that's a good thing to stand with. Do you want to answer for that? No, okay.
And you bring a point, I'm not going to answer it. But I think people should be aware that on the ballot form, there is, you got to vote for mayor, council, school board trustees, but at the very bottom on the left-hand side, there's a part that you make a vote yes or no if you want to shrink council from 7 to 5.
Do you want to take a couple more questions? All right, that throws you in the mix of vision. All right. Do you just, sorry. Do you want to stand up and tell us who you are?
This was actually for Colin. Colin, I'd like to know that, in the agreement, whether or not Lantzville, like itself, is getting water down here so we can improve on the actual core.
The water agreement with Nanaimo does not provide water to Lower Lantzville. when it comes to the standpoint of council, council has, although not overtly, subtly made mention of moving 225 connections to Lower Lantzville. But as I mentioned before, that would, based on the existing usage compared to our standards, we wouldn't actually be meeting our standards. We've actually been violating our standards for about 20 years. So they'd have to deal with that in order to try and get water down to Lower Lantzville based on this agreement.
So this doesn't do it?
No.
I disagree. Although the system is stressed, certainly the long-term view is that we probably will get additional water from the Nanaimo at some point. If the system has been carrying 950 connections for 10 or more years, and we relieve it with 225 connections when we switch them over to the Nanaimo system, I think we will be able to generate quite a bit of water for new homes or existing homes that really need to be connected.
Yeah, I'm Carol Dumont. My husband was born and raised here, and lived here for many years. And I think I have sort of two parts. One, are you planning on reducing the size of the council? And more importantly, are you planning on reducing the size of the staff over there?
I don't know if that's a mayor.
When it comes to provincial legislation, it's actually kind of strange. In order to reduce council, that's the reason for the assent voters question on the ballot. It actually can only be reduced as a result of a vote of the people. To increase it, actually, you don't need a vote of the people. I have no plans to increase it in that regard.
I'm actually more interested because
Yep,
I
the second part.
as a now, when I get used to widow person, I honestly don't know if I'm going to be able to afford to live in Lantzville anymore. Never mind keep my yard looking nice because I can't afford the water.
When Lantzville incorporated, it was based on an incorporation plan that included contracting out any services that we possibly could. And for the first 8 years, that's what we did. For example, when it came to the planning function, it was contracted out to a local lady, Pam Shaw. Also, the subdivision approving officer was contracted out as well. From my standpoint, that's the model to go with. And what that does is that allows you to reduce costs because you only pay for people when you need them, as opposed to paying people regardless of what they're doing. The idea of decreasing those costs, decreasing the staff, and utilizing contracting out, to me is the efficient way to go, and that's what we did for those first 8 years.
So this is a unique community where we have more councillors than staff. So it's rather interesting. And then the proposal to do a core review. If you need to do a core review with 4 management people, I think you're lacking the experience to really manage this community. A core review in Nanaimo may work, where you're dealing with 200-300 managers and you want to know where you're going. But if you can't see what the management staff is doing on a daily basis and what their output is, and you need a core review to recognize where to go with that, I think that it's not going to work.
All right. I know who you are. You're a troublemaker, but okay, go ahead. What's your question?
The 50 water connections that are spoken of that
Are you directing this to anybody specific, Mike?
well, I'm going to ask it of Jack because he is
Okay.
familiar with the
So
agreement.
Mike Sargent.
The 50 connections that are spoken of in the agreement, are they not usable in the downtown core?
The new connections, the agreement is not all-encompassing, but the agreement in part is 225 shifted to Nanaimo, that's phase 1. The other is the 250 for the Winds area, which is to be voted on, whether they want to proceed of that. And then there are 50 connections a year cumulative to be used for new development. The Nanaimo have asked initially to maintain that in Upper Nanaimo. But the freeing up of the 225 to our water system should supply sufficient water to provide some development in the lower Lantzville.
You wanting to answer to that as well, Colin?
And it's something, but I don't need it.
Pardon?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
When it comes to that 50's usable in Upper Lantzville. Again, they've made reference to moving the 225. They don't have any of their consultants' reports that can justify that in terms of the future of the system, yet that's what they've signed off on. When it comes to the standpoint of the number of connections, over the next 10 years, Nanaimo has promised 936 water connections. When it comes to that standpoint, what should have happened is council should have had it directed to an area, for example, like Lower Lantzville, which would then free up 651 connections to go to Upper Lantzville, which would supply the Winds area, which would supply Blackjack, Alger, etc. When it comes to the standpoint of location, like I said, in my mind, Lower Lantzville is where the development should occur, but those 50 are dedicated to the upper pressure zone.
All right. We've already taken a question from you, but did you have a question? You're not running for council, are you? Because they're one of that table so far as not running for council.
Around here, but.
All right, I'm teasing
But
you.
I just have
What's your name?
Bob Hofstrom, and I'm in Lower Lantzville.
Right?
So I have, actually, it's a two-part question.
Are you directing it to anyone
I'll
specific?
direct it to any of the
Okay.
that would like to address it. So
Okay.
the first part is that given, this is something that's been mentioned but not really elaborated on earlier, the notion that we're going to be paying an annual fee for some economic development, and we already pay for the theater, but this new fee for economic development, given that that's part of the deal, my first part of the question is how do you justify charging all the residents of Lantzville for that economic development fee, which is a new fee? And secondly, if this agreement's not signed, changing agreement not signed by the city of Nanaimo, would you proceed with the agreement as it is? Two-part question.
Yeah, I don't quite get the second part, but let me address the first part. You know, this community, as a bedroom community, we have 800 people that are full-time employed in Nanaimo in various service entities and professional capacity. And so any economic development in Nanaimo is to the benefit of the economic development of Lantzville, because that's where our people work. We have around 1,200 people that report income that are all retired or part-time or home businesses. And so they also benefit in some indirect way, certainly home businesses, because I presume they're getting customers from Nanaimo. So the request for Nanaimo was to be fair. We were paying for economic development, and so why should you as Lantzville not pay for economic development? In spite of a water deal, the pressure was on anyways through the regional district. So, and the same goes for the Porch Theatre. For example, the Porch Theatre, we were one of the lowest supporters of the Porch Theatre. Now the argument can be made, and our survey showed that we're not using the Porch Theatre that much. But that could be a cultural gap, you know, and so they asked us to support the Porch Theatre to the extent that Nanaimo itself is supporting it. And so I support that. I feel that to be fair to Nanaimo, whether there's a water agreement or not, I think we should be equally sharing their economic development. Yeah, could you just clarify your second part again?
The second part of the question was, given that if some changes were proposed to the agreement to Nanaimo City Council, and they rejected the changes, would you still proceed with the agreement?
Well, the agreement is signed, so yes, you know, the agreement with Nanaimo is signed, and councils are continuous, so the next council has to live with this agreement.
Thanks. First off, with regards to the economic development side of things, that was a new function, effectively, that was created in the RDN in 2012. There's two other parties involved in that agreement. One is Area A and one is Area C within the regional district. When you speak to those directors, those RDN directors that represent those areas, they're tremendously unhappy about the economic development function and the impact or lack of impact on their areas. Further to that, they also have within their agreement that it's required to increase, I believe it's by $3,500 per year for that actual cost, despite the fact that they're unhappy about it. So in terms of it, viewing it as an economic development driver certainly hasn't played out based on those other participants. With regards to whether or not to continue with the water agreement, first of all, that proposal that I would put to them where just a tweak of that section where it has the water, the 50 connections potentially to go to existing residents as opposed to new development, there's no reason for Nanaimo to reject that. Basically, it's the same number of connections, it's just serving existing residents, and in fact, at the time we originally went into negotiations with them years ago, that was actually the principle by which they were living by. So why that section's in there, I have no idea, but when it comes to it, I don't see them rejecting that change.
Answer the question. I didn't answer the question.
Oh.
Would I continue with it if they didn't change it?
That's the question.
That's something we'd have to look at in terms of what other potential options there are out there, because it really bothers me to exclude some residents over the others if the agreement doesn't achieve what we originally set out to do.
All right, so I guess we'll wrap up. We'd like to thank, oh boy, now people want to ask questions. All right, sorry, I'll take the lady in the black sweater and then I'll take you in the, peeking around the corner there. Hi.
I'm Mel Raj.
Hi, Mel.
My question is directed to Joe. And our family moved here and purchased in 1994. There's actually two questions. We also live up in the forgotten triangle. Water is one connection away from us, and we've also asked council before about getting water. So I'm hoping that with this water agreement, that the new development will not get it first. We'll have an opportunity to get water to our well also, as we do have some contaminants. Now my question to you is, in any of all the information that I've seen out in your propaganda, I haven't seen anything, or maybe I've overlooked it, that you're actually a realtor. So with new development, where will you stand in making your decisions because of the conflict of interest with the developers?
Well, I'm very sensitive to that. I think a smart mayor or councillor would be. I'd have to review the situation individually to see if there would be a conflict of interest. I mean, generally, a realtor sells homes, not just pieces of property, and commercial buildings as well. How that fits here, I'm not sure. But there was something that you said earlier regarding the water deal.
Let's get off of the first question.
Pardon me?
You better get off of it. You didn't answer what?
What I want to say regarding a conflict of interest is that I would have to judge each situation differently. And if there is a conflict, naturally let's step away. But I don't know how you can deprive someone from making a living.
All right. Well, your question in the back. Oh, yeah.
The conflict of interest issue is a complicated one. When we started out with this agreement, the first thing we did with staff was to investigate the potential conflict of every councillor on the existing board. And it's published. If you look on the website, I stand there rather naked. You can tell exactly what I own. You can see the properties I own. And so it was deemed I was not conflicted. And so I'm sure if that particular conflict of interest issue comes up, we would seek legal advice and we would address it at that time.
Thanks, Jack. That's a good full disclosure then.
Yeah, most of the people here sort of comment.
Do you want to step forward a little bit, just so we can hear you?
They're born and raised, and that's great. I'm probably one of Lantzville's newest
West residents.
What's your name?
Todd Gallant. I'm just curious, everybody sort of touched on village rejuvenation, the words at least. Nobody's commented, at least to me, as to what that would look like as a resident of Lower Lantzville. Very curious on behalf of young families as well, which is, a minority in the room today, but I know there's lots of young families in this community, and more that want to be here, but it's not necessarily a community tuned to young families. So if you can sort of slide the comments together as to what the proposal is for village rejuvenation, and of course it's affecting young families going forward.
Of course, these are the plans that we have. There is an OCP. There may be a revision required to the OCP. But we never knew whether this contract would succeed. It went back and forth between the two communities, and there were all kinds of strange things. So, but now that we have that potential, we can see what the vision may be. And so, it's difficult for me to make a direct commitment. What are we going to do? But there is an OCP that addresses that at the moment. Is it really applicable at this point in time? There may be some revisions required to address that.
Thank you for bringing that up. Just recently we've completed a study, and council has it right now. We're going through it. It'll be in the public meeting on Monday. Love you to take a look at it, give some feedback to us. It looks pretty good in my mind. A lot of talented people put it together, but it now needs some additional input, so that would help. Thanks.
When it comes to the village core area, there is a document out there with regards to the village core plan, but specifically with regards to your question, one of the challenges is the pure economics of the village core. People have made reference to Qualicum, and we want to be like Qualicum, and certainly we want the look and the feel of Qualicum, but our biggest challenge is the economics are not going to directly work here because of the competition of Nanaimo there. So the first thing that I would look at doing with regards to the revitalization of the village core is doing a study and bringing in people to advise us with regards to what will work. Because there's no sense in beautifying the village core if it's going to end up just being empty stores similar to some of the other towns. So that economic study needs to be done first, and that would be looking for some sort of a balance between, say, more senior population and also recognizing the aspect that we also want to be a diverse population, including the children's side of things. So that's the first step that I believe needs to be done.
All right, so, Joe? Yeah, we're going to wrap it up. Just let me thank everybody. Okay, so we'd like to think, we're done now, that everybody's being very cooperative. You have to get a little faster next time. We want to thank Mike Sargent in the back there for organizing this event. Give everybody a chance to come out, and Nancy for doing the timekeeping on the questions. Thanks, Nancy Gillies. And to the Lantzville Pub and all the staff.
Thanks to Deb.
And to all the candidates. So, thank you, Jack, and Joe, and Colin. And what I'd like to do just before everyone runs away is remind you to go out and vote. So there's some pamphlets here that tell you